Greetings, salutations, how you doing? It's IB Nation Sports Talk, or it's IB Countdown to Kickoff, excuse me. But the gang is all here. Jesse Stiers, Vince Dario, Sean Stiers, getting you ready. Notre Dame, Purdue coming up this weekend. And, guys, turns out the talk of an undefeated season, I guess it was a little bit premature, huh?
I mean, we got 5 days out of it or 6 days out of it. I mean, so that was, I guess, kind of cool. We're always looking for something to talk about. But yes, it was.
You're really endearing the fans to you right now, Vince.
Yeah, well, we had 6 days to talk about it, and then on the 7th day, apparently Notre Dame rested, and it wasn't a good rest. So yeah, not talking about one less thing to talk about. Not going to be talking about them going undefeated anymore. That's for sure.
No, that'll never be a topic again.
I think that it was very premature, obviously. I think the NIU loss is embarrassing. And at this point, we just got to move on, right? You got to find something new.
To some extent.
A new winning streak to latch on to. And I think that's what I'm most excited about is if Notre Dame really is going to change, this sort of loss should motivate them and kind of light a fire underneath their booties a little bit.
That's for sure. It is Notre Dame and Purdue, though, this weekend. And we've got, as always, a lot to get to in this show. We'll get to, specifics on Purdue. There's obviously a big quarterback storyline this week and, kind of subplots to go along with the quarterback storyline. And we're going to get into that. I wanted to start kind of with this, though. Andre Tonsel, one of our loyal listeners to IB Nation Sports Talk, he shot me a question on Twitter X today. Do you believe we were expecting too much from this team because of all the new additions they had and the pieces they had coming back without actually having seen them play? What do you guys think about that? Were the expectations too high for this team considering all those moving parts that were coming in?
I think in hindsight, it's easy to say that, we were expecting a little bit too much, but I think that's what comes along with being, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback, the head coach at Notre Dame is you are expected by your fan base to at least, make a playoff run at this point and have a realistic shot at the national championship. So, when you are a part of some of these, what I would say, blue blood programs across the country, I think that's kind of, the expectation every year is that you're getting good pieces. They're going to step in and collectively they're going to perform really well. But when you look back on it, this is a new offensive coordinator. It is a new quarterback. It is a new offensive line. It's a, running back room that has some experience, but still relatively inexperienced. And then, a wide receiver group that's kind of also mix and match of guys who stayed, guys who came in through the portal, new wide receiver coach. So there was a lot going on offensively. I will say that. But again, this is Notre Dame. And I do believe that, we did expect all those pieces to come together much more, quickly and naturally than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I honestly do not think the expectations were too high. There's a ton of talent on this team. We talked about it all off season, how deep this team is. It's the deepest roster they've had in forever. That is still true. I mean, that hasn't changed. I don't think the expectations were too high because of that. They lost to Northern Illinois. Like, even if they didn't have a deep roster, they should still beat Northern Illinois. So I don't think the expectations were too high. I don't think we went, too far off the reservation with, some of our predictions and kind of the way we saw the season going. Look, nobody saw this coming. And unless your paycheck says Northern Illinois on it, nobody saw this one coming. I'm sorry. Nobody did. And
nobody believed in him. Nobody believed in him, Vince.
Nobody.
Only us.
Them brothers of the world. It's Northern Illinois versus everybody.
Uh-huh.
Well, heard that one before. But no, I don't feel like we were wrong. I just think they didn't come to play. Period. End of discussion. That's why, what's the cliche? That's why they play the game. Well, you didn't come to play. You can't take teams for granted, no matter what the level that they are, because they had all the time in the world to win that game. They didn't do it.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because it would have been one thing if they had lost to Texas A&M, but then come home and beaten Northern Illinois. Then you could say, okay, maybe the expectations were too high. We're still finding out what Texas A&M is. I still think they'll be a decent team. Big game between them and Florida this weekend, by the way. A couple of teams, I think, really trying to find themselves after opening weekend losses to pretty good teams, and then, beating the doors off a couple of FCS teams in week 2. But, I think maybe the biggest sort of heap of expectation that we put was with Riley Leonard, and just the fact maybe we underestimated, based on everything that Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock are saying, and Mike Denbrock was saying a little bit of it even coming into the season, about they're still kind of getting Riley Leonard up to speed with the offense. And I think, if nothing else, that there's definitely a disconnect. And, we don't have to go down this rabbit hole completely. We're going to get into the Riley Leonard stuff, but there is a disconnect between, I think, what the head coach expects, and then how that intertwines with what the offensive coordinator and the quarterback and the quarterback's coach, sort of how all that syncs up, it sounds like, based on the things that Marcus Freeman said last week before the game, and, just everything else. But I do think maybe we underestimated the impact of Riley Leonard missing the spring, not being able to get into that offense with Mike Denbrock. But also, I do think that him coming back from this injury, it seemed like, if anything, like it could have been more on his mind last week than even in the opener against Texas A&M. Just that some of the hesitancy that he had. What that's due to? Is it because he's gun shy with that offensive line that's a little bit hit and miss? And how much does that connect, with the existing injury that he had? And of course, now he's got, to some extent, a new injury to go along with it, with his non-throwing shoulder.
I think all that's fair. I think the pushback that people are going to give when we say, no, it was exactly what we think it's supposed to be, they just didn't play well, is the Riley Leonard effect. And I do think that that's legit. He is not even playing the way he played at Duke. And the discussion that we always had over the summer, if he just plays the way he did at Duke, this offense is going to be just fine. This team is going to be great. They're going to win a lot of games. He doesn't even have to be better than he was. He just has to be who he was.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, in the first 2 games,
he's not that guy.
He's a shell of himself, like not even close. And so, you've got all the fanatics out there that are, he sucks, he's terrible.
Well, that's what gets me, is like everyone acting like, oh, Riley Leonard can't throw the ball, he's a horrible passer. All that, look, he was never a precision passer at Duke, but he was, with the talent that he had around him at Duke, he's got more talent around him right now at Notre Dame. And he's got a better offensive coordinator than he had at Duke as well. So you can't tell me that when you throw 20 touchdowns in a season and run for 13 in the same season, that shouldn't be able to translate.
100%. Yeah. And so the evaluation wasn't wrong. He's not playing well. And now you have to dig into, why is he not playing well? Is it the philosophy? Is it the coaching? Is it this, and this? That's what they have to figure out. They have to figure out why he's played like garbage the past 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, at Duke in his sophomore season, he was a 3,000-yard passer, a 20, and a guy who also threw for 20 touchdowns. Like, those are good stats as a true sophomore, in a Power 5 conference. I would take those stats any day from a starting quarterback. So I echo a lot of what Vince was saying. There is some sort of disconnect, and I don't know if it's, Marcus Freeman is uncomfortable with the style of play that Riley Leonard truly, the way he played at Duke, and not wanting him maybe to play like that at Notre Dame, which would be very disappointing, because it's you don't go to the portal to get that type of quarterback and then not fully use him, to his highest extent, essentially, the in which he can be the most potent, quarterback for this team. And so, again, I don't know where that disconnect is, but it's definitely there, and it's something that has to be resolved relatively quickly.
Well, look, and I know a lot of people want to look at what he did last year, and they say, well, even the first part of the season, he only threw for, what was it, 3 touchdown passes or something like that. Yeah, but he also ran for 4 more touchdowns, and they won those games, including a season opening win over Clemson that was entirely between the defensive effort that Duke put on the field. Offensively, that game came down to Riley Leonard making a couple of plays, and that's what you bring in Riley Leonard for. And like, just looking at his stats does not tell the story of Riley Leonard. They won those games. Most of them going into the Notre Dame game were blowouts. So he also wasn't playing in all those games, and he didn't need to pass as much, even when he was in those games, because they were winning lopsided games and scoring 40-plus points. And then anything that he did after Notre Dame against Louisville and Florida State was obviously, as we have kept trying to pound home all the time, Vince, that was after the leg injury. When you have a leg injury that obviously ultimately ended up requiring multiple surgeries, once he got to Notre Dame, between the leg and the toe, he wasn't able to plant off that back leg, and he wasn't able to run the way he was before that. So, like looking at last year is just, there's no sense in that. Really, what you have to look at is 2022 when he was fully healthy. And again, like, those first few games of last year, okay, yeah, he didn't throw a bunch of touchdown passes, but he's Riley Leonard, and he figured out a way to get things done. And that's why you go get Riley Leonard, because of all you have to do is look at Texas A&M. No, it was not a gem, but when the game was on the line, he found a way to get it done. And that's why you wanted Riley Leonard. And, whether you're Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock, whoever it happens to be, that's the guy that you've got to fall back on. That's the guy that you've got to channel and let him play. That's just what it comes down to.
That's the key. Let him play. They're not letting him play his game.
Yes.
They are corralling him, and they are trying to make him play a game that is not his. That's a problem. That's a philosophical problem, and it doesn't highlight what he's good at. Look, we were all sitting back and watching that game last Saturday. Notre Dame gets the ball back, with whatever time was left on the clock. It was like, okay, well, it's Riley Leonard time. He's probably just going to run the ball 13 times, get him into field goal range or whatever, and ice away this win. And it obviously didn't happen because they asked him to do something that he is frankly just not great at.
The other side of it, though, like, how much do you think this shoulder injury played into that? Because he obviously didn't run at all in the second half.
It's hard to say, because I don't think he really ran much after the first quarter. You know what I mean?
So even before the injury.
Yeah. So that's really hard to say, to be perfectly honest with you. I feel like, and we've seen this with other teams, right? High school, college, you play a lesser opponent. Okay, well, we're going to work on some stuff. We're going to work on some stuff. And I'll let you take it from here, Jets, because I think you and I are on the same wavelength. But like the work on stuff thing tends to bite you in the ass more than it does, that it helps you.
Well, the frustrating part about, I can get if you want to try to, work on the passing game and maybe some of the downfield progressions and stuff like that. But it gets to the point in a game where you just, like, you got to do what's working. And their lack of really running the ball, I think, is what annoyed me the most. Is they weren't showing anything in the passing game. And up to this point, the running game has been the most explosive part of their offense, whether it's, Jadarian Price, Jeremiyah Love, Riley Leonard. That's where all of their touchdowns have come, on the ground, running the ball. So at some point you had to abandon, this idea of what you wanted to do in terms of the pass game and just find a way to win. And to me, that was incorporating the running game more, and especially, in the second half. And I think what this is kind of turning into, and to answer your previous question, I think we'll have a really good understanding of Riley Leonard's ability to run the ball after the first quarter in the Purdue game.
I think we're going to know right away. I think you're right. I think you're right. But, like, to the whole who the opponent is and how you play the opponent, game plans, because I agree. Like, and we've seen it in the past as well. Even Brian Kelly fell into it. And the worst case scenario, is, I know you've brought it up, was Ball State a few years ago when they were playing the number 2s and 3s, giving them more reps during the week because they were planning on them being able to get out there and play, because they thought they were going to be blowing out Ball State on Saturday. And obviously they barely pulled out a win over the Cardinals. But Paul Maneri, the former Notre Dame baseball coach, won a national championship, obviously, at LSU a few years back. He's now at South Carolina, but he was here at Notre Dame, and I had the fortune to get to work with him when I was doing play-by-play for the baseball team. The thing I learned from him right away is you play your game and you play your best until, like, those guys give you the kind of lead that warrants you take the foot off the pedal and you start putting in some of the subs. You don't plan on the subs, and you don't play a different kind of game early on. You play your game to the hilt and you go full throttle with your starters, and then your starters earn the opportunity for the number 2s and number 3s to ultimately get in the game. You don't start dinking and dunking around like it looks like they did last week because they had a 1 touchdown lead. You got to keep doing that. Go full throttle when it's 28-0 or 35-0 or 33 to, whatever, to 6 or whatever it happens to be. When you've got a 4+ touchdown lead, that's when you think about, okay, now we can start doing some other things and work on this and work on that. That's like, again, it's just a completely wrong mindset.
Yes.
And that's what got him into this, into this problem to begin with.
I don't think Notre Dame has an identity on offense. And so I think that contributes to the consistency of this is how we're going to play and this is how we're going to, execute really well. And then once, like you were saying, you take the foot off the pedal. But to me, that's just another kind of big glaring problem is I just don't think Notre Dame has the identity of who they are offensively and how they're going to move the ball and score points quite yet.
That's what comes off to me. I have no idea what this offense even wants to be right now.
That's why it's a game-to-game situation, guys.
Yeah. So we talked to Marcus Freeman Thursday, and we asked him how Riley Leonard looked in practice this week, and have there been any changes in the duties of the quarterbacks, any of the quarterbacks in practice this week?
Nobody's roles have changed. Riley's had a really good week of practice, has made some really good throws and done a really good job at decision-making, taking care of the football. And everybody else has been done a great job too in terms of what they've been asked to do. But nobody's been asked to do anything differently this week than previously.
And we won't play his comments, but that also asked him about C.J. Carr specifically. C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchie, what Marcus Freeman said, have been splitting the scout team in number 3 reps. And the number 3 reps at practice are very minimal. So you're actually going to get more scout team reps, but you're obviously not running the Notre Dame offense, you're running the other team's offense. But that's how those two have spent most of these first 3 weeks of the season, with Riley Leonard getting the first team reps and Steve Angeli the number 2 reps. And as he said, no changes, so this reports of the shoulder injury and all that. And I have no doubt that he hurt his shoulder. To me, it's to what extent he hurt his shoulder and how that potentially limits him. And again, as you guys said, I think we find that out relatively early on. I'm just going to ask you, Vince, I'm going to take a flamethrower to this show right now. And I'm going to say, Vince, if this is the offense that they're going to run, would they be better off just going with Steve Angeli?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is not one moment where I thought, yeah, Steve Angeli could do that better than Riley Leonard. Not one time. I'm sorry. Not one time. And if you're trying to read between the lines of what the coaches think of Steve Angeli, okay, he's the second string quarterback. He's getting second team reps, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. If everybody's speculation that Riley Leonard is as hurt as he is or really damaged himself, and they're like, yeah, no, Riley Leonard's starting, what does that tell you about Steve Angeli? What does that tell you about their opinion of Steve
Does
Angeli?
it really, though? Or, you've got a high-profile transfer, and are you really going to bench him after 2 games? Or, are they full speed ahead on, I realize
they're
you're going to play the guy that gives
winning.
you the best chance to win. But what have we seen about this game plan, about Riley Leonard, about anything that says this is the guy who gives you the best chance to win right now?
There is no throw on the football field that Steve Angeli can make that Riley Leonard can't.
Okay, hold on. I don't disagree with that.
Okay.
But you've also got to pull the trigger. Like like you talked about on the throw to Chris Mitchell that was intercepted, there were 2 guys running wide open underneath. And there were plenty of throws like that. And so I guess my point is, and Jesse, I'll let you weigh in after I give my counterpoint to Vince, because I do still think Riley Leonard is the better quarterback, but they also have to, as we've said, let Riley Leonard do Riley Leonard things. I mean, that's essentially the best way I can put it.
Yep.
Like, he's done Riley Leonard things. He did Riley Leonard things against Texas A&M, and they won the ball. He did Riley Leonard things in the first drive of the game last week, and they scored a touchdown, including him diving into the end zone. But for 90% of the game, they didn't let him do Riley Leonard things. But he's not even making the checkdowns, is my point. Like, we can jab Steve Angeli for being check down Charlie and all this different stuff. And I guess that's my point. Like, I would take the checkdowns if it means you're going to throw some passes that at least last week, Riley Leonard was not even willing to throw. And, so I guess that's my point. Like, Angeli's not going to give you the dual threat aspect that Leonard gives you, but he is at least willing to throw the football, underneath and give your offense a chance to move the ball.
But he's also not going to be able to make those checkdowns on his backside, which I think would also happen.
Jess, this is where you get to weigh in now. You've heard both sides. Look, don't feel like you've got to agree with me, because like early in the week, especially, like I was not on that. But again, it's like when you look at what they've asked Riley Leonard to do and what he, at least for one game, was not willing to do. That's kind of, it's like, man, would you just be better off, with Angeli pulling the trigger? Jess, go ahead.
So I think there's a lot of layers to this question. I'll start off with just kind of the overall. I would not go to Steve Angeli. I think Riley Leonard does give you the best chance at winning the game. He's the most proven quarterback on the field. A lot of people like to bring up, okay, what did Angeli do last year? What did he do in his start in the bowl game? That's out the window to me. All of the time that he was in, it was in mop-up, second, third string. And against Oregon State, he's going against a team where its head coach just hit the road to go to Michigan State. All their star players are out. I felt like Notre Dame had more talent on the field in that game, point blank. So I thought Steve Angeli was going to do better, and they had, a month.
Yeah, but Notre Dame had more talent on the field last week too. So
right. And I think Notre Dame had a good amount of time to game plan for that game. But what I'm going to say, though, is I think that Riley Leonard has a leash if he is truly hurt and no longer a dual threat quarterback. If they're not willing to use his legs, or his legs are compromised because of the shoulder, I do think he has a leash in the passing game. But I think Angeli, even if he comes in and makes some of those kind of check downs, simpler throws, those are going to get ate up at some point. And I think that it's easy schematically on defense to kind of start taking those kind of plays away. And then we, again, get into the same kind of question of, how are they going to get the ball down the field to that?
But how are they not going to take that away with Riley Leonard if he's not even throwing, like there's no real threat of a
well, I think that's where like the RPO stuff comes in, his legs come in, and that's where I'm trying to say.
Let me ask you about RPOs then, because they used more RPOs in the opener against Texas A&M. Looked like just one against Northern Illinois last week. Do you think that they didn't use as many last week because Leonard was not making the correct reads when they did try him against Texas A&M?
I do think that he wasn't making the best reads against Texas A&M. It felt like there were times where he was, making the wrong one and kind of, could have kept it and used the situation to make a play with his legs or with his arm kind of on the perimeter. But, going to this all goes back to the same point to me as in that game against Northern Illinois, why do you not have more design RPOs? Because that is the type of game that Riley Leonard plays. So again, it feels like we're not taking Riley Leonard's skill set and best utilizing, everything else around him to run this offense essentially, because even if his shoulder is, somewhat banged up, you can still, use the threat of the RPO and make them, make those linebackers and safeties have to honor it. And that's just going to help your pass game even more. And I said this the other day, there's still ways that he can run the ball without taking a hit, right? And I think that especially comes in the RPO situations where you can get to the sideline and get out of bounds without taking, a hit essentially. And so I think that that's stuff that you can more incorporate, if even with a compromised shoulder.
As a true runner, he hasn't taken a big hit so far. The hit that he took where he got injured was when he got sacked, when they left him in the pocket,
Yep.
So it's like you've got to get him out of the pocket. Yeah. And I think he's better avoiding contact that way, because
that's
kind of style forever.
The only other big hit he took was illegal, and they got an extra 15 yards out of it. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I just think you got to move the pocket, allow him. He's not a true, 3-step, 5-step drop quarterback, step up into the pocket and make a throw. I think those kind of more RPO, quick, you can move, kind of do these like sprint out concepts where you're moving the line and the quarterback, horizontally sideline to sideline. And
well, that's going to
more
help
of
the
his
offensive
game.
line as well, so they
Yeah.
don't have to pass protect the same way. And that's there've been some good, there's been some bad. Anthony Knapp, according to PFF, is the lowest rated of the offensive linemen. I think he's got like a 54% pass block grade. Let me double check this here real quick. I don't want to disparage Anthony Knapp. I mean, obviously he's been thrust into a situation. Yeah, so his pass block against Texas A&M, he had a grade of 25. He had a grade of 59 against Northern Illinois, and the scale goes up to 100, by the way. So that kind of gives you an idea. But as I've said during the week as well, the running backs have to be better because they're not faring that well either in blitz pickup and things like that. But like Jess, you and I we've been talking about. I'll save the Jeremiyah Love Jadarian Price because I'm going to save that specific to the game plan against Purdue. I want to get one final thought in about the quarterbacks, and then we can kind of move on and look at Purdue here a little bit. So Freeman talked about what it would take to make a change in the game at quarterback if Riley Leonard is struggling.
I don't know if there's an exact parameter. We have to have success. We have to move the ball. We got to score points. And so if we're not able to do that, then you got to make changes. But there was no consideration of changing Riley that last game.
No consideration of changing him in the last game, which I think goes back to Vince's point, probably what they think of Steve Angeli. What would it take for you guys to make a change at quarterback if Riley Leonard is struggling? Vince, go ahead.
He can't walk anymore. Like, I mean, injured so that he can't play the position. That's honestly the answer. Like, knocked out.
So injury is the only thing. What if he throws a couple more bad interceptions? Like that would give you no pause at all.
It really just depends on how those interceptions, did they bounce off a guy's chest, and go into a defender's hands? Like, I can't just say blanket interceptions. I need to see what those interceptions
bad
are.
Interceptions. Bad, like the second interception, intended for Chris Mitchell last week was what I would call a bad interception.
That is a bad interception.
The first one was tipped, so you can at least,
right. So if he throws, I guess, 2 or 3 of those and they can't score any other way, then I guess you make a change at that point. Okay.
I think if they haven't scored an offensive touchdown by halftime of this game, I like that's kind of the answer to me. If they're losing in a game where they don't have an offensive touchdown, a 10-3 game, a 7-0
what if
game.
The running game is getting stuffed too. You gonna just put in the second team offense?
No, I guess I'd have to see, what all that's like kind of what you were saying. There's layers to that question of seeing how the first half game plan unfolds. Are they doing things? Who's hurting who? Essentially, is the game plan, hurting Riley Leonard? Is Riley Leonard hurting the game plan / the entire offense? But if they can't get anything, going in the pass game, enough to put points on the board, I would be confident to say if they don't have an offensive touchdown by halftime, you'd have to do something to try to salvage. You can't lose 2 in a row, to be quite honest with you. So at that point, I think you have to do whatever it takes to try to win, essentially.
No, and that's your point about you can't be 2-0. Marcus Freeman has used up all his free passes now.
Agreed.
And he probably used them up last year, but this is obviously a tipping point now. And it's a very pivotal time in Marcus Freeman's career because you lose this game, you lose to Purdue, 2 teams you were supposed to beat, you're not going to the college football playoff. Like that is completely out of the picture. And it just throws into doubt anything that's going to happen this season.
Would you still consider Purdue a rival? Because they're in state. I know they haven't played in a while.
They're a historic rival, sure.
Yeah.
I would definitely say like all the right. Yeah. I mean, they're a historic rival, but this series was played every year for what was it? 60, 70, some 80, whatever, from 1946 to 2014, whatever that is. You know how bad my math is. So that's what, 70 years roughly, something
Close
like
to
that.
it. I think like
continuous.
66.
But they've only played, I think, twice since then. The game a couple of years ago at home, and they played that game down in Indy a few years ago in a Shamrock Series game. So, like, none of the players really for either team, I think, consider this a rivalry at this point. Like the schools, the schools, obviously, to some extent, because you do play for the Shillelagh Trophy and all that different stuff, there's at least a rivalry aspect, but it doesn't fit. It's definitely not Notre Dame USC, and it's not even Notre Dame Navy at this point. So
that's fair. I mean, I get it. That's fair.
I guess the reasoning for my question was, does it provide more? Marcus Freeman loses. To me, it's like, well, now you've lost to an in-state team. One of your considered rival. You know what I mean? Just kind of like the impacts that it can have. But I mean, a loss is a loss. I think.
Yeah, at this point, it doesn't even matter who it is if they lose again to an inferior opponent. If they lose again, then it doesn't matter who it is. Like, I understand where you're coming from, Jess.
Do you agree? Like, Marcus Freeman goes to the hot seat right away.
He's already on
this game.
Yeah,
I think he's already on it.
He's getting preheated right now, and
it's warming up. That's
If he loses, then the oven's ready and the pizza's ready to go in.
Let me ask you this. Are either one of you going to feel different about this team if they just go out and wax Purdue? Or do they need to continue to do that every week after week after week?
No, honestly, they do, because that's how they should have beaten Northern Illinois last week.
One game is not going to change my thoughts on.
It's not going to change anyone's opinion. Now it's a matter of it's still the bigger question with Freeman now because of last week is, do you get your team prepared to play an opponent regardless of what the opponent is, who the opponent is, what level they're supposed to be? Can you be consistent over the course of the season? He's going to have to do that over the course of this entire season, and then he's going to have to wax on, and repeat it again next year. Like, it's gotta continue. That's said coming into the season. That was the biggest question I have about him, and unfortunately, after 2 weeks, that's now the biggest question that I have about him going forward. Like, all the other stuff is there. There's so much good stuff that Marcus Freeman does, but this is a huge issue. Like, every team's going to suffer an upset or have a near upset at some point, but you can't do that when you've got a decided talent advantage and you lose to 3 different teams in a 2+ year period that when you run them all out on the field, you were definitely better than. And you can probably throw Louisville into the mix as well. Like, if you just look at recruiting ratings, Notre Dame should have been better than Louisville last year, but they were outcoached and outplayed by Louisville. They were outcoached by Clemson last year as well.
Yeah, you stole my buzzword. It's just all about consistency. Will I feel better if they wax Purdue? For sure. If they can, because that, I think, leads to optimism and hope that this thing isn't as bad as what it is, and that, maybe it was just a slight derailment.
Was it a blip? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would feel better for sure. And like I said, the big thing was, the big word is consistency. And I think that in order for us as fans to feel good, it's got to happen against Purdue, Miami of Ohio, all the way up until, USC. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think Marcus Freeman will be forgiven for this loss specifically, because we got to this point because of the losses to, Marshall, Stanford, Louisville. We got to this point, and I feel like the NIU game is kind of the tipping point for a lot of people, and I don't think he'll be forgiven until he has postseason success. I don't even think getting to the playoff is enough. I think they'd have to, go in this season on a hot streak, get into the playoff, and at least win one game in the playoffs to be ultimately forgiven for what happened against Northern Illinois.
I don't disagree with any of that. As for Purdue, they're led by second-year head coach Ryan Walters, former defensive coordinator, but they were a bad defensive team last year. Number 92 scoring defense in the nation, worst team in the Big Ten against the run. I'm not sure if Vince is still yeah, I was going to say, I think Vince froze up there. I hadn't seen his lips move in quite a while. I'll throw it to you first, Jesse. How confident are you the Irish can run against the Boilermakers.
Well, I think that is honestly their best chance at winning this game, and I think that they do have a strong chance at running the ball. Jeremiyah Love is averaging, just over around 75 yards. Not
6.8 per carry. He's averaging 6.8 per carry for the season on 25 carries. Bryce has 15 carries for 103 yards. I mean, like that is one game's worth basically for, and I realize they're splitting reps and Love's getting a little bit more, but they both got healthy yards per carry averages.
I mean, Jeremiyah Love is averaging 85 yards a game and 6.8 per carry. And those don't even factor in that he didn't touch the ball but once the entire second half against Northern Illinois, right? And so, this is a guy that I think could average that could easily be averaging 100 yards a game. And he had a really good game against a good Texas A&M defense. He should have had an even better game against NIU if he would be, continuously be fed the ball. And I think, Purdue run defense wise is going to be the worst of the three that Notre Dame has seen so far this season. And so I do believe that Jeremiyah Love and company should be able to have a field day with the Purdue defense. And I think the run game has to open up some of those layups that we were talking about with Riley Leonard and get him kind of comfortable in the game.
This seems so odd, and I realize you do have a different offensive coordinator and a different kind of quarterback, Vince, than what Notre Dame has had in the past, but it just seems so simple. Doesn't the offense just kind of need to start running through the running backs right now to kind of help out the quarterback and everything else around them? Just get them moving the ball, considering, again, Love is averaging 6.8 per carry. Bryce is averaging around 5.5 per carry, and they only combined for 15 carries last week. It just seems like a pretty simple solution.
It's the classic phrase, right? Coaching malpractice. I mean, isn't it that? Like, isn't when you look at the stats and you look at the fact that they went away from the running game when they did, that's coaching malpractice, man. Like, how are you not giving two of the most dynamic players on your roster the football when in crunch time when it matters? Doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't.
Not at
Notre
all.
Dame as a team is averaging 5.2 a carry, between Riley Leonard, Jadarian, Bryce, Jeremiyah Love. Like I'm sorry, but that's what NIU did to beat Notre Dame last week. They stuck to the run game, first and second down, bludgeoned them, got some, manageable third downs. Sometimes they'd get stopped, but most of the time they were picking it up and extending the drive and continuously moving down the field. And so if I'm Notre Dame, I run the ball until Purdue shows me that they can stop the ball. Stop them.
And, look, I don't know. I'm sure Aeneas Williams did something to kind of earn his way, into the rotation after we didn't see him against Texas A&M. But, time and place. Again, exactly. Your best guys should be on the field until you have a comfortable enough margin, and then you start working in whether it's Williams or Ford and, all this. Like, these two guys, Love and Bryce, need to be staples on the field. PFF ranks them as Notre Dame's two highest graded offensive players. Love is at the top. Bryce is second. You know who's next after that? Actually, Billy Schrouth and Emil Wagner, the right side of the line. And like I've said this before, like if you need to get some tough yards, just run right behind Billy Schrouth. That's literally all you have to do.
100%.
Especially when you've got, like, think about the crease that Jeremiyah Love worked his way through to get that touchdown against Texas A&M.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
It's all you need.
Get small, baby.
It's dynamic.
Get
Give
small.
the football.
I mean, both those guys make second level linebackers and safeties look silly. Like they have the moves and the speed to make a guy miss and just be gone ultimately.
Yep.
It's what James Cook did last night in that long run for the Bills.
Right. Well, and we were talking about how if you look at Achane, the Miami Dolphins running back, the things that he was doing last night, little simple screen passes, stuff like that. I mean, Purdue likes to blitz a lot, Jess. It feels like there are just some easy ways that you can both get Riley Leonard comfortable in this game with some easy layups and really exploit some of the aggressiveness that Purdue wants to have against Notre Dame defensively.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this up because, if if Purdue wants to, and not even if they don't want to blitz. I just think that when we're talking about to date, who are the most explosive electric players on offense? Jeremiyah Love, Jadarian Bryce. If you can't get them, and if your passing game is struggling, why not work them into the passing game too, right? And so that's where it comes in now is, if teams want to blitz you and play man, especially on the perimeter, just flare your back out, just dump it down to them. Have a design screen or a design check where you isolate your running back in man coverage with a slow linebacker from Purdue on the perimeter, right? And just have Riley Leonard just get the ball to him. And again, I think that helps both parties because one, you're getting your best playmaker the ball in space, and two, you're letting Riley Leonard see someone catch the ball. I think that's half the battle. It's like when guys are doing bad in basketball, they just need to see the ball go through the hoop essentially. And I think the same thing holds true for Riley Leonard. It doesn't matter if it's a 50-yard bomb, a 20-yard post route, or a screen to your running back. Just let him see someone catch the ball essentially, right? And so if Purdue wants to blitz and play a ton of man, then I think that's even more of a reason to slip your running backs out there and let them, take advantage of man coverage.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you used the basketball analogy since Riley Leonard was a hoopster in high school as well. So, yeah, it just, again, seems like there are but I do like that. And, because like the saying, shooters just got to keep on shooting. And then once it finally starts going through the hoop, they get a little bit comfortable. And, so if you have to give Riley Leonard some buddies or, give him a mid-range game or however you want to kind of continue that basketball analogy, I think that's all you have to do between those two running backs coming out of the backfield, especially Love, though. And the fact that you've got a tight end like Mitchell Evans, who showed he could make a big play for you over the middle on that little skinny post last week. Just more of that. There's so many mismatches that those guys, and you can throw Greathouse in there as well. There's so many mismatches that they can cause, and it doesn't have to be all downfield. I know everyone wants to see the big sexy plays downfield, but right now I'd take just some short and intermediate passes to get them going because they've got playmakers who can do really good things with the ball once it's in their hands.
In an ideal world, this is like me, daydreaming here. Just go 21 personnel with Mitchell Evans, Jadarian Bryce, Jeremiyah Love. Have both of those guys or all of those guys, basically either one in a power run scheme. And then if you hit a play action, just have Jadarian, Jeremiyah, and Mitchell Evans all on short routes where you can just dink and dunk them, all day essentially, because you can do so much in terms of movement. So I just think,
baby, so sexy.
I think that would be
I think you're speaking the love language of a lot of people right now when you start talking about 21 personnel.
Well, and those guys can lead block for Riley Leonard too.
That's what I mean. That's a great power. It's a great power look too, because now you got three bodies all ahead of him. If he does
space.
Exactly.
Space, baby.
All under 5 yards. It would just be so optimal to get, those your two most, again, explosive players on the field at the same time, and then how you can combine off of that. So again, that's daydreaming, but I hope maybe we see some of that at some point.
Can only hope.
Hudson Card, 15 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year. He completed a little under 59% of his passes, had 200 rushing yards. He also ran for 5 touchdowns. So he can run a little bit, not a runner like Riley Leonard. Either one of you have any definitive thoughts on Hudson Card? Personally, I equate him a little bit like to a Connor Wigman. And I think from a personnel standpoint, I think it's going to be fairly similar to A&M, and that I just don't think he's got a nice running back, but I don't, as far as passing targets, I don't think he's got enough around him to match up with Notre Dame. What do you think, Vince?
I would say I would have said the same thing about Northern Illinois. Obviously,
yeah, it's fair.
But we can't.
But they came out with a very specific game plan and just exploited Notre Dame. So
we can't keep going back to that. Well, that's kind of lazy. But look, Hudson Card, I know was one of the people that they thought Notre Dame should get 2 years ago when they got Sam Hartman, right, or a year and a half ago, whatever the timeline is. I was never all that impressed with Hudson Card. I mean, it felt like when he landed at Purdue, it was like, oh, okay, that sounds about right. He's got some talent and he can spread the ball around. But you're right. I don't think the talent around him is enough to make it work offensively.
I think the biggest thing with Hudson Card is, coming out of high school, he was a big deal. He was recruited by Texas. That's where he spent his first 3 seasons. And in his second and third season, he split a lot of time at quarterback. And now he's in his second season at Purdue. I don't think he's this overly, gunslinger, someone that, Notre Dame needs to be ultimately over concerned with. I think the thing that they need to be concerned with is he is, this is his 5th year of college football. And I think that, leadership and executing a game plan is something that he can do. And so Notre Dame can't fall in the trap again because I think Purdue's going to run the ball a lot. And I think they're going to ask Hudson Card to kind of work off that run game a little bit and just do enough in the passing game to kind of, maybe pick up some first downs or, get them into scoring position type situation. But I think Purdue is going to be a run first team and allow the pass to kind of build off of that. So again, I look at Hudson Card as more of a leader, a guy who can execute the game plan and really just an overall kind of game manager against Notre Dame. Because I think, if you ask him to do much more out of that than that, I think that's when he'll get uncomfortable and turn the ball over, get into interceptions and stuff like that.
Before we get into rapid fire, I wanted to look at Notre Dame's strong side defensive end position because Josh Burnham hurt his ankle at the end of the game last week. Between him and RJ Oben, he has far and away been the better of the two. I mean, Oben ended up sitting on the bench for a good majority of the game while Burnham was out there last week, but he is questionable according to Notre Dame. Could see more Bryce Young, and I know that makes a lot of people happy because everyone gets happy when you start bringing in the high-rated
young gun
freshmen, young guns, and all that kind of stuff. But he is still young. He's only played 2 snaps so far this year, and remember they didn't play him against NIU last week. So you've got potentially Burnham out, Oben, who's been MIA so far, maybe more Young. How confident are you in this strong side defensive end position going into this game?
Not as confident as I thought I was going to be going into game 3. That's for sure. I mean, I just, with Burnham out and, Oben pretty much being, like you said, MIA, I am hoping that it's time for him to step up. Look, again, we've seen him be successful at Duke, right? We've seen him be successful. Now, they're asking him to do some different things that he didn't necessarily do at Duke, and maybe the learning curve is, too high or whatever. But, man, he's not showing anything, let alone not understanding the defense. So hoping to see something out of this position. And now with some added reps maybe for the young gun, maybe we're going to see some flash there. And maybe RJ Oben, this is his chance to,
really step up.
Put up or shut up, kind of a situation because, look, Burnham has played well so far. Now, obviously, he's not going to play this week. So if Young shows that he can do it and Burnham has already shown that he can do it, this might be the opportunity here for Oben to be like, hey, either you do it or these young guys are going to get more playing time.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of piggyback off of some of the stuff Vince was saying there. And I'll just flat up say RJ Oben has been unacceptable at the defensive end position, the starting defensive end position. I guess I should rephrase that too. Yeah. I think Josh Burnham has been playing better than him, even though he's listed as the backup, on the depth chart right now. And so I not to be dramatic, but this is a make or break game for RJ Oben. I think if he can't get it done and Josh Burnham isn't available, I'm not going to feel good about that position because he's looked slow so far. He's looked a step behind. A bit confused. And I think I said this yesterday on the show. They just need someone on, especially in that NIU game. They just need someone to set the edge. And if the play is going away from them, someone who can squeeze down the line and be there for that kind of cutback run.
Backside, yeah.
And I think that if RJ Oben doesn't step up, I do believe that Bryce Young he's more athletic. He's more agile. He's more, someone who can set the edge, someone who can be there in terms of the cutback lanes and stuff like that. So, even if that's the situation, I think that you'd ultimately have to find maybe someone else that can play that position too. I don't know if that's Junior Tuialamaka or who that might be, but again, this to me is a make or break game for RJ Oben.
And I think someone else again, even if Burnham is getting minimal reps because of the injury, I'm sure he's at least tested the ankle this week. But if he's not able to go, then they have to have been working someone else with some reps at that position as well. Maybe it is Tui Alamaka since he hasn't had, he hasn't seen action on the other side, the Viper side so far. The intriguing one, and I think that everyone kind of got intrigued about it a little bit, Jason Onye, who's of course a defensive tackle, they moved him outside to that end position against like kind of some jumbo personnel that NIU put on the field last week. So he was over there. I do wonder, like again, like if it's not going well with Oben and you've only got so many bodies out there, somebody's got to be
number two,
even, whether it's Bryce Young or somebody else. It feels like maybe Onye could fit that bill because he does have a bigger body. He does have some length. I mean, basically, like you said, the main thing you want is set the edge. And so like, does Onye kind of have the discipline, I guess, since he's not used to playing that position, to being able to do that kind of thing? I don't know. Going to be curious to see where they go if Burnham's not out there, though.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go.
Right. I'm going to hit you. I don't know who wants this first one. Show of hands, who wants the first one? Who wants to go first? You want them all? Okay. Who has more on the line this week? Marcus Freeman or Riley Leonard?
Marcus Freeman. I mean, Riley Leonard, I realize this is his career potentially. If he can't make it at Notre Dame, is he even going to be asked back to come, asked back to Notre Dame next year if he redshirts this year with an injury? I don't know. And therefore his pro career could be in jeopardy and all of those different things. Right. So it's important for him, but from a Notre Dame standpoint, Marcus Freeman, man, you better come out with something here, because if it's the same old, you think the critics are out now, they're going to be out in full force if you can't get this thing done. I just feel like, Riley Leonard's playing career had an ending at some point. You can coach into your 70s. Okay. This could be a make or break thing for Marcus Freeman's career.
If you ask Jim Harbaugh, he's trying to coach until he dies. So, that's kind of, he said in an interview, I played football as long as I could, and then I knew I wanted to coach football as long as I could, and then I'm going to die, essentially. So this is an easy answer, and there's only one answer. It's Marcus Freeman. He's already preheating in the oven like we were talking about, and this thing is just like a ticking bomb. If they can't get this, they're like a sinking boat right now, just grasping, for air, essentially. If they can't get this thing figured out, Marcus Freeman falls to 1-2, and that cascades into, maybe a 9-3, 8-4 season after that. It's just simply not good enough, knowing that you're in year 3 with the schedule that they had this season and all of this other talent that you're bringing in around Marcus Freeman as well. So, it's sad, because I do want Marcus Freeman to do well, and I know it is a lot on his shoulders for a first-time head coach, but that's what you signed up for, right? And again, there's really no margin for error at this point.
I do agree that it's Marcus Freeman. I'll just give a couple points on him, and then I will give the Riley Leonard side of things, since, you guys covered it very well. I mean, Marcus Freeman is still young. He's only 38 years old. So, like, he'll have a chance to, at the very least, go be a defensive coordinator for somebody if he does end up getting fired here. But, like, when you look at how things have worked out for other Notre Dame head coaches after they have been dismissed, whether it's Bob Davie, Tyrone Willingham, Charlie Weiss, things didn't work out for any of those guys after they were fired by Notre Dame. So just from a pure head coaching perspective there, it's all on the line, I think, for Marcus Freeman. Again, I think he can go on, and, even if it's just being a defensive coordinator someplace, I think he'll be fine from that perspective. Again, I'm going to give the Riley Leonard side of things, because, like, if Riley Leonard has a horrible game and he ends up getting benched in this game, it could literally be the end of his football career. And, the kid is 20 years old, 21 years old, whatever he is right now. So, again, like, Marcus Freeman is going to go on and keep coaching in some aspect, most likely someplace, even if it's just being a defensive coordinator. But for Riley Leonard, you get benched in this game. There's probably no return at any point this season. And you were a hired gun. You were a 1 year. You were a guy who was, in like your NFL prospects and all these different things are riding on how this season goes for Riley Leonard. So, again, you tank it, you get benched. That could very well be the end of the football career of Riley Leonard. Again, I do still think Marcus Freeman has more on the line, but
Riley
yeah,
you're
Leonard
right.
has a lot as well.
Could be the beginning of the end for Riley Leonard too.
Yep. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame is one of 5 FBS teams without a touchdown pass so far this season.
It is absolutely unacceptable. You are the University of Notre Dame. You are, held to really a higher standard of, in this sort of blue blood conversation. And so to be one of only 1 in 5 teams to not have a passing touchdown, it's just simply unacceptable. I don't care, if Riley Leonard is a dual threat quarterback and he's better with his legs and whatever. You had to find a way to get a passing touchdown against NIU last week. I can maybe
should have had at least 2 against NIU.
Yeah, I can maybe understand Texas A&M because of the game plan and needing to get the ball out quick and how good that defense was. Sure, but it's completely unacceptable in my opinion.
Embarrassing was the word I was looking at. I mean, with the teams that they're lumped in with and not having thrown a touchdown pass, embarrassing, man. Like, you got to do better. Got to be better.
Well,
it's embarrassing.
Air Force is one of the other 4 that don't have one. Okay, you can take it because it's Air Force, right?
Right.
Option and all that different kind of stuff. Northwestern and Miami, Ohio are 2 of the others. And those 2 teams just played each other. If it wasn't last week, it was week 1. Those 2 teams have played each other, and they're on the list. And Western Michigan is the other. So think about that. Army and Navy, triple option teams, both have more touchdown passes than Notre Dame right now.
Embarrassing.
Completely unacceptable. It is completely.
I just saw Vince's heart sink there a little bit.
Completely unacceptable. That has got to change. That has got to change. It's got to change fast. So which are you more confident in this week? The Irish get their first touchdown pass of the season, or they complete their first pass of more than 20 yards downfield?
So question, does it have to be airtime 20 yards? Like, does a 10-yard catch that goes for 10 more yards, like yards after catch, or does it have to be airtime of 20 yards?
I had a feeling this might come up, and I didn't give it that much thought. Honestly, I thought it might be Vince who asked the question. Do you want to give a ruling on this, Vince? What are your thoughts? Does it matter if it's airtime, or can it be catch and run?
Doesn't matter to me at all.
Let's go catch and
20
run.
yards or more.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's catch and run, I'd like to say both in this answer, but I'll say the passing touchdown because I think it's such a point of emphasis, and everyone, it's on everyone's mind. I think you have to find a way to get Riley Leonard. Again, he needs to see someone catch a touchdown as well. It goes kind of, both ways, I think, right now. So I'm going to say both, but if I had to pick between one or the other, I'd go with passing touchdown.
I'm fairly confident in the passing touchdown one as well. I think they're going to finally get off the schneid on the passing touchdown. So, yep, that's what I'm going to take passing touchdown.
Passing touchdown is my answer, but I think both are going to happen on the same play. If they do what we've been saying that they should be able to do, Jeremiyah Love takes a little screen pass and houses that thing for like 40 plus yards. That's what I'm going with.
I like it. I'm down.
All right.
I'll take whatever touchdown they can muster, but that'd be great.
Tell you what.
It doesn't matter
pass
how,
is
right?
going to happen this week. So, back to the quarterbacks. If they go to Steve Angeli this week, scale of 1 to 10, what's your confidence he would make a difference?
Like a 1.5. I mean, I was going to go negative numbers, but I don't want to be that guy. I just don't think there. Like I said, there is nothing that Steve Angeli can do that Riley Leonard can't do. He's not going to make a difference.
I'd go a 2 out of 10, maybe a 3 out of 10. It's definitely less than a 50-50 toss-up. But like Vince said, like these coaches, no matter what style of offense they want to play, or they have this vision for, Riley Leonard is still better at it than Steve Angeli, because he would be in if that wasn't the case. Right. And these guys see them every single practice. Like they're not just trying to purposely sabotage themselves by putting a lesser of a quarterback on the field at the end of the day. So if Riley Leonard can't get it done, then what's to say a quarterback that's less talented and has less confidence is just going to come in and just sweep things in a different direction. So I'm a 2 or 3 out of 10.
I think they think that Riley Leonard is the better quarterback for the offense they allegedly want to run. But again, we haven't seen that so far. And I go back to my point that I was making earlier in the show. Riley Leonard's not even willing to take the checkdowns right now and just make those easy passes. That's why, as we talked about, just hit him some screen passes. Just get him something to get his confidence going early. My answer to this is a 4. I honestly don't think it would be any worse than what Angeli did against Oregon State in the Sun Bowl. Purdue's defense might be slightly better than that, but what did they do in that game? They ran the freaking football. They didn't put all the pressure on the quarterback. That's what they need to do anyways. We talked about earlier in the show. They need to get Bryce and Love involved. Those are their 2 best offensive players and their 2 most explosive offensive players, and they've got to get them. They've got to be a bigger part of the game plan, no matter who the quarterback is. But my confidence in Angeli, I'd put it at a 4, so just a little bit higher than you guys.
You're the most confident one here. Good. Proud of you.
Scale of 1 to 10. I never thought that would happen, by the way. Like my scale of 1 to 10. How confident are you Leonard will be the only Notre Dame quarterback to play against Purdue?
Barring injury, 10 out of 10. If he's a healthy Riley Leonard, then he's playing the entire
Injury
game.
factors into this, though. You have to factor in, we did see him get hurt last week. So everything considered, what's your confidence?
7 out of 10. I give him a 70% chance of finishing this game.
Okay.
If injury is considered.
I'm going the complete other direction. I'm going to say it 1.
Wow.
This is a glass half full approach, because I think
1 is glass half full.
Not listen.
Okay.
Because they're going to be winning by so much, they're going to bring in Angeli.
Wow. That really is glass half full.
Yes.
Man.
And I also think they're going to get him out as soon as they possibly can. It won't be like a normal, like a 4-touchdown lead or anything like that, but they'll have a lead that they think with the way their defense is going to play, because
comfortable enough. Yeah.
They're like, hey, let's get him the hell out of there, because we do want to keep him upright this season. So I think they're gonna pull him quicker when they have a lead to make sure he doesn't get hurt.
Man, I can't wait for this prediction now. Prediction.
I'm in Jesse's range, because I don't think this is going to be a blowout game at all. Like, after what indication is there that the offense is just going to make that kind of lead? That's exactly right. There is less than zero. Less than zero. Interesting 80s movie, by the way. But my confidence is 7. I'm confident that Riley Leonard is going to be better this week, but I think there's still going to be some growing pains in the offense. I think the defense is going to play well enough, and I am factoring the injuries into that. I still think, like, if everything that they're saying is not just misleading us, and they're going to end up starting Steve Angeli because of whatever non-throwing shoulder injury that Riley Leonard has, like if everything that they're saying is on the up and up, then I think it was just kind of like a minor little thing with a non-throwing shoulder, and he'll be all right. He'll play his game. The question is just going to be, to what extent they let him play his game out there. I'll go 7. Vince is like, that's as optimistic as I've heard Vince in a long time.
That's right. That's all I got. I'm just trying to get through the day.
This game is Notre Dame Purdue, of course. So fill in the blank. If Notre Dame was going to schedule a Big Ten opponent to play regularly, like annually, or it doesn't even have to be annually, regularly, it should be blank.
should be Penn State. I had to get it out there. It should be Penn State.
Wow.
We've gone through the Purdue cycle. We've gone through the Michigan State cycle. Give me Penn State. I think it's two relatively equal programs over the last 2 decades, right? You could say both teams are solid, but haven't done enough to win the big ones, right? Like that's the biggest knock on James Franklin as a head coach is winning the Ohio State, the Michigan, the New Year's Six bowl games. That's kind of more, to me, why I like this matchup, because they're two equally, two equal opponents. They're relatively close in geography. And I think it's something new. And I think you could introduce kind of a new tradition, essentially.
Penn State doesn't even belong in the Big Ten, so they're out.
What team does belong in the Big Ten?
Well,
actually?
Fair. That's fair. I mean, the number is growing, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
They were the first team, I think, that came in when they originally, expanded. It's like, really?
And Notre Dame was playing them fairly regularly up till that point.
And then they joined the Big Ten. They're like,
95, yeah.
Nope, not playing you anymore.
Yep.
I think this is a 2-part answer for me. I think it's a split between Purdue and Michigan State. Those are the two that I would like them to see kind of go back and forth. Maybe, 2, something along those lines. Those are the 2 teams that I'd like them to see.
Jesse and I were talking actually yesterday that it seems like there's a simple way to do it. You play a home and home with Michigan State. You play a home and home with Purdue. That like the next 2 years, and then the next 2 years you play a home and home with Michigan, and then you just cycle through that. So all of those teams, so all of those teams are showing up, again, not annually, but somewhat regularly on the schedule. So like every cycle you go through, and you do it like that. I think that would be the perfect thing, because those are the 3 most regional Big Ten. And like Michigan State and Purdue were on the schedule every year for 70 plus years together. And then because like when the Big Ten expanded the first time and they expanded their conference game schedule, that's when, and it was around the same time that Notre Dame had the ACC agreement. That's when they all, went off the schedule. I know everybody talks about Michigan. I would still like to see Michigan more often, even though I know Vince hates them, but I would like to see, because we talked earlier in the show about, is Purdue a rival? I would like to see some of these old, more traditional rivals at least show up on the schedule a little bit more regularly over the next several years. Whether that happens, I don't know. But I would like to see that happen. And people are bored by and I think that there's a good chance that it happens because of these new TV contracts as well. Like the Sunday night NBC games and stuff like that.
Well, and I would echo this even more, because I think I brought this up yesterday as well. If you schedule more of these Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan, maybe Ohio State, Penn State, in this kind of, 250, 300 mile radius or diameter, if you drew a circle starting at Notre Dame, I think that benefits Notre Dame too, because you can stomach a loss to those programs more so than you can to a team like Northern Illinois. So if you can replace Northern Illinois with, Michigan State, Purdue, Michigan, and you do fall flat on your face in those kind of games, well, at least it's Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan. Yeah. It's not the NIUs, of the world. And I was listening to something earlier today. Urban Meyer was on some podcast, and he was talking about his time at Notre Dame. They never considered playing any of those MAC programs, right? Like that's something that they never used to do, because they wanted to play these, they wanted to play Purdue and Michigan State. Yeah. Yeah. They want to hit every quadrant of the country against good opponents, because they want these Subway fans essentially to come to games and feel like the games that they're going to matter, right? You're not going to just a MAC team, or, last year when they played Tennessee State. And so I think honestly, screw this whole, getting some easier teams on the schedule potentially. I like kind of flushing them out and adding back in more of these maybe traditional rivals, because I think it helps in more than one way.
Great point, Jess. Vince, do you have your bell where you are right now?
Oh, I have no bell here. I got no bell.
He's at school and he has no bell. I mean, what is even going on?
The bells are over the PA now.
All
It's
right.
all this new tech.
I like that. I mean, that's a great thought. I like that. You're absolutely right. And then, the fact that you're playing 2 MAC teams this year and you lose to the first one. And then, of course, you've got 2 service academies coming up later this season as well. I mean, we all know what this schedule is, and it just makes it even harder to stomach when you lose a game like that last week, especially when it's a home game, obviously. Some interesting game props this week. Jeremiyah Love has an over-under of 76.5 rushing yards. I want to do the props a little differently this week, and we're not just going to go over-under. I'm going to throw some questions at you.
Whoa.
Does he have to go over if the Irish have a chance to win this game against the Boilermakers?
Yes.
No. Doesn't have to, because I also think with the 1-2 punch in the backfield, they're not both always going to have a great game, but I think that they should and will ride the hot hand. So it could be Jadarian Price that has a hell of a game, and then he gets the yards as opposed to Jeremiyah Love. So Jeremiyah Love doesn't have to, but if he does, then that's obviously a good thing.
I think, again, like going back to the screen passes and stuff like that, I think he has to be at least somewhere in the vicinity of 100 total yards if they're going to have a chance, because just flat out, he has to be a much bigger part of the game plan. I think that his success helps take pressure off Riley Leonard, that, whatever pressure there is on Leonard. So, yeah, I don't think he necessarily has to go over the rushing yards, but he definitely needs to be around 100 total yards. I do think that he goes over the 76.5 rushing yards, though.
Yeah, I'm really, 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 really mad that I don't live in Indiana right now, because I want to put a large sum
this
on
week's
him going
version
over.
of Jesse's. I really wish I could put individual player prop bets on this game.
No, but he had 79 last week and didn't really play the second half. And I think in a game where there's going to be a concerted effort to be like, you know what, our running back's our best player on offense right now. Let's find him, a way to get close to 100 yards. Let me throw, that question back at you a little bit. Then over under 1.5 receptions for Jeremiyah Love on the game.
He has 3 through 2 games, so that is the perfect over under right there. To me, it seems like a no-brainer that it should be over. So I will go with that. Again, like if Purdue wants to pressure Riley Leonard and do some of that stuff, they have not shown a consistent willingness to try to get Jeremiyah Love the ball in the passing game, which they said they were going to do during training camp. So maybe that says that I should be picking under, but I'm going to go over because it feels like another element that they can work into this game that would be very easy to do that they haven't shown so far. What do you think, Vince? Vince was hoping I wasn't going to ask him.
Yeah.
I'm taking the over as well. If Vince
if
that does anything for Vince.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm so, I don't want to say over this team, because that's not true. I'm not over the team, but it's like
what you're supposed to what's going to happen.
What am I supposed to think about this team when it comes to offensive numbers? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the hardest part for me, is what am I supposed to think about these offensive numbers? That's the hardest thing for me. But yeah, I mean, I'll take the over as well. I guess I am fairly confident in that, so I will take the over.
Receiving props. Jaden Greathouse's number is 28.5 yards. Bo Collins is 43.5. Are you confident that either of them can hit the over?
I guess I would say I'm more confident in Greathouse because his is just a lower number. And I know that these guys are supposed to be, basically their premier wide receivers, and even more so Jaden Greathouse and, his ability to play all the different wide receiver spots. So I just got to go with the lower number because no one's really been consistent so far. But if he catches that ball that he dropped last weekend, he hits the over alone on this one. So I would go with Greathouse as the one I'm more comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lower number, so you got a better chance of hitting it, obviously. I think that, look, their number one guy has been Bo Collins. I think they are going to try to throw the ball around a little bit more, and I think Bo is going to be the beneficiary of that, but I think Jaden could get that in one catch. So, I mean, Am I confident? No, I'm not confident in either
I'm not
one.
confident either, but
No,
like
I'm not.
they've both hit the over once and they both hit the under once in 2 games. And that's probably why Vegas has the numbers set where they are right now. Like, and like you can say, well, Bo Collins has been their obvious go-to guy so far, but that also means Purdue's going to pay more attention to Bo Collins this week, so
Right.
I would probably be a little bit more confident that Greathouse will, because as you said, the number is lower and he should be the beneficiary of whatever extra attention that Bo Collins gets.
Yeah, true.
But it's almost flipping a coin at this point, like you said, Vince. No passing yard prop for Riley Leonard.
Good.
What does that tell you guys?
It
No
means
one
I wasn't even
knows.
close last time or the time before. He was under both of the numbers, and now Vegas is like, screw it. We don't know what's happening. We're not even put one out.
It means he's been so bad in the passing game that Vegas doesn't even want to put a line out there.
Well, I do wonder, like how much the injury comes into play. Like they don't even want to touch it with the injury and stuff like that. So, Purdue's Hudson Card's number is 200.5 yards. So will he get to 201 yards? Can he go over against Notre Dame's secondary?
I'm taking the under on this one. Wigman had 100. Hampton had 198. But if you factor out that 83-yard chunk that came on the touchdown, he's only down. 100. He's down to 115 himself. So we're talking about, an average of probably around 110, 120 yards max between 2 quarterbacks, right? Secondary should do its job. This game's going to be determined by whether or not Purdue can run the ball like NIU did. So I will comfortably take the under on his passing yards.
Look, the secondary did not have a great game last week either. And I think they're going to bounce back and have a shutdown game. So
I do too.
I will gladly take the under on this one.
Yeah, he did it in all but 3 games last year. Nebraska, Ohio State, and Michigan. So, like Ohio State and Michigan were obviously the 2 most elite teams, and Nebraska was still a decent defense last year. So, like, you look at that, and again, like you look at Notre Dame's secondary and Purdue's receivers. The only way he's going to get it is if you have some big fluke play like NIU had last week, and I don't think that that's going to happen this week. I don't think there's any way that Mike Mickens and Al Golden let that kind of repeat performance happen. So I'm going to go under for Card as well. All right, game prediction time. Notre Dame, 9.5-point favorite. The over-under is 47.5 points. It does seem like a generous amount of points to me for this game. I don't know what you guys think. Jesse, do you want to go first with your prediction?
No, because I'm still doing numbers in my head right now.
All right. Well, I had to submit mine, so I have to stick
too.
with kind of what I said. So I'm going to stick with it. I still think Notre Dame can and should and will win this game. I just have no idea at this point how it's going to play out. And anybody that says they do is lying to you. They have no idea how this is going to play out. Okay, based on what we've seen the first 2 weeks. So for me, I would say Notre Dame 24, Purdue 10. Well under the total points. Okay. I guess I would take, based on my prediction, I guess I would take Notre Dame minus the 9.5. They should win this game comfortably. They should. And I hope that they will. So that's the way that I'm going with this. They should score more than 24, but I just don't know. So 24-10, that's what I've got.
Are you ready, Jess?
No, I want yours.
Okay, so I've got a low-scoring game as well. 24-16 is my final, so that is 40 total points. So again, I'm under the point total of 47.5, and I also would be taking Purdue plus 9.5 in that department. I like you, Vince. Just from a pure talent standpoint, this shouldn't be that close, but we haven't seen any evidence that Notre Dame is going to be the offensive juggernaut that we thought they were going to be coming into the season.
Right.
A heavy dose of those running backs, as we've talked about all game. Love and Bryce should go a long way, and maybe that turns into something different. And again, like Notre Dame's defense, the better defense of the 2 units, but we didn't see them force turnovers last week either. against Northern Illinois. So I think that we'll see at least some progress in the offense, but anyone looking for some dramatic turnaround from last week to this week, you probably shouldn't even watch the game. I'll just tell you that. Like, again, I think it'll look better, but if it looks better, it's going to be mostly because of Price and Love, I think. Those are the two guys who've got to see the ball more.
And even if there is an offensive explosion, that changes nothing. Honestly, unless there's a very clear difference in philosophy, that it means nothing. It means nothing. Let's see what they do next week. Let's see what they do the week after that. So they just need to get a friggin' W. That's what they need.
That's it.
So my original score was going to be Notre Dame 24, Purdue 13.
Okay.
But after consideration, I've thought about two things. One, this defense is going to be pissed off, and they've only given up, in my opinion, they've given up one touchdown in both games.
I love pissed off Al Golden. Just so everyone is aware.
That's what I mean.
Pissed off Al Golden.
Al Golden on the record. Is pissed off this week.
Be as surly as you want to be, Al. I love it.
I think this defense is going to play fired up, and I think there's going to be a chip on their shoulder for an already really talented team. And again, gave up one touchdown to Texas A&M, one touchdown to NIU. I think the NIU touchdown was fluky. I don't think they give up a touchdown this game. My final score, Notre Dame 30, Purdue 6.
30-6.
Wow. Okay.
Man. We were sailing those boats right into the end zone. Convoy of shiny gold helmets.
But it goes back to this is not accomplished unless Notre Dame makes a concerted effort to get Jadarian Price and Jeremiyah Love the ball on offense in both the running game and the passing game, because I think they can set up field goals, they can get touchdowns, they can do it all. I think these running backs can shoulder the weight, and if that's the game plan going into this week, I think that you can see a Notre Dame getting 3 offensive touchdowns, 3 field goals. That's how I'm getting to 30. And again, I just think this defense is just going to be so fired up on the road, and I don't think they're going to give up a touchdown.
I'm not sure about that, but just to your point about you run things through those running backs, it sets everything else up. If Notre Dame can play with the lead, that's when some of those turnovers, that's when some of those mistakes for Purdue are going to start happening. So, all right, Jesse's the most optimistic of the three of us. He's got Notre Dame covering and not quite going over the point. So everyone's under the 47.5. Again, 47.5 is a lot of points.
Have you guys not watched these two teams?
Are they basing that off Purdue beating Indiana State 49-0 2 weeks ago? That is a factor in this. Indiana State has anywhere near the defense that they're going to see this week.
All right. 1AA team.
I know. All right, well, that's going to do it for today. Have a great weekend. Hopefully everyone enjoys the game. Stay sane. Vince and the crew will have the post-game show afterwards. And, of course, we will talk to you next week with a full slate, hopefully a more joyous week next week than this week. Even though this was a quick week, this week flew by. I don't know about
you. But we're going to try not to break records for the longest post-game show ever.
If possible.
Was
last week it, by the way?
Had to have been
5.5 hours.
5.5. Yeah.
Hey, when Notre Dame puts up a defensive touchdown shutout, I will pop in for 5 minutes, say I told you so, and then pop out.
All right, that's going to do it. Thanks for joining us. IB Countdown to Kickoff. We'll talk to you next week.